I pulled off Highway 1 just before dusk. The wind off the Pacific always had a way of slipping through the car windows, no matter how tight they were rolled up. My back ached from the drive, and the trunk was packed so tight I knew it would take me half the night just to unload it. But when I turned down the quiet road and that little white house came into view, the one with the chipped fence and shutters too old for their own paint, I felt it, that stillness, that mine, no brass gates, no buzzers, no family name carved into a rock at the end of a driveway, just a plain mailbox and a key in my hand that no one else had a copy of. I parked crooked and didn't bother fixing it. Walked around the house once with my hands in my jacket pockets, letting the evening hit my skin. No one knew I was here. No one knew I bought it. And for once, I liked it that way. Inside, the air was stale, but honest. I opened a single window, dropped a box by the front door, and pulled out the one thing that made it feel like mine. A wobbly old porch chair I'd kept since I moved out at 23. I placed it outside like it belonged there, like I belonged there. It creaked under me as I sat. I stared at the ocean until it disappeared in shadow. This was the first thing I'd done for myself that I didn't have to explain to anyone. No updates, no opinions, no compromises, and certainly no Veda. That's my sister, in case you were wondering. The golden one, the how's your sister doing one. I'm the afterthought. Always have been. It's not bitterness, it's just how it is. She stayed close, had kids, went to all the birthdays. I moved 2 hours away and never really came back. Every time I spoke up about what I wanted, career, travel, even therapy once, it became a joke, or worse, a group project. Let's help Callan figure it out, they'd say, as if I'd dropped my own life and needed rescuing. So I stopped telling them things. And after a while, they stopped asking. Buying the house was quiet. Just my name on the paperwork. I paid in pieces, months of freelance gigs, skipped vacations, old furniture I never replaced. If I'd told them, they would have offered opinions, suggestions, maybe even cash with strings. But I didn't want that, because if I told them, it would have never stayed mine. The first night was slow. I unpacked one box, took out a couple dishes, a lamp, the blanket I used to keep on the couch. I didn't own much, and that made it easier. Everything here had a story. Nothing was filler. Dinner was simple. Soup from a can. I sat outside again, eating with a spoon that had bent in the drawer years ago. It didn't matter. The quiet made the soup taste better. The chair, my chair, was the only piece of furniture I brought. It was chipped and uneven. But it stayed with me through every place I'd rented, every job I took, every late-night decision I didn't tell anyone about. That chair knew more about me than most people did. Silence meant safety. No voices dissecting your choices. No one watching you from across the table like they're waiting for you to explain yourself. It's not just a house. It's the first time I'm not an extra in someone else's life. A week went by. I got used to the rhythm. Coffee before the fog cleared, long walks, grocery runs where I didn't see anyone I knew. I started to believe this space would hold. Then came the knock. I wasn't expecting anyone. The neighbors hadn't introduced themselves yet. I figured it was Amazon or a city inspector. But when I opened the door, there they were. My mother, Veda, her 2 kids, clutching juice boxes, already barefoot like they'd been here before, and smiles, all of them. "We thought we'd surprise you," Veda sang, holding out a tray of muffins wrapped in foil. "Isn't it cozy? The kids love the beach." I didn't say anything at first. I just stepped aside. They moved fast. Towels over the arm of the couch. My mother opening cabinets like she needed to organize. Veda walking through the hallway like she was checking square footage. No one asked why I bought it. No one asked how I was doing. No one said, "Congrats." Instead, my mom turned around with a glass in her hand and said, "You don't need a whole house to yourself, do you?" I swallowed that, like a bitter pill I didn't ask for. Let them come in. Let them take their shoes off. I smiled. But inside, something slipped. Like a picture frame not hung quite right. By the end of the day, my niece had claimed the guest room. My mother had rearranged the silverware drawer. Vida left behind a stack of beach toys and said, "We'll just keep this here for the summer." I stood by the fridge, watching them laugh from the living room, watching them live in a place that wasn't even theirs. I remembered a line my mother used to say about me when I was younger. "Callan's so easygoing, it's a blessing." But now I wonder, was that just code for, "She won't fight us on anything"? That night, after they'd gone to bed, sprawled out in rooms I'd barely had time to settle into, I walked barefoot through my own house. No lights on. I touched the kitchen counter, the hallway wall, the doorframe of the bedroom. Not to admire it, just to remind myself it was mine. They don't know what this place means to me, but maybe that's the problem. The next morning came too soon. I opened my eyes to sunlight cutting through the blinds, brighter than it had any right to be. My feet hit the floor, and for a second, I forgot they were here. But then I heard the creak of the stairs, the light thud of a child running across hardwood, and the rattle of the back door swinging open. I moved carefully through the house, my house, but felt like I was trespassing in it. There were extra sneakers by the door, a cereal box I didn't buy on the counter. My niece's laughter came from upstairs, loud and sharp, like it was echoing in a hallway I no longer owned. I poured myself a cup of coffee. The mug was one I'd brought from my old apartment, but now it sat among others that weren't mine. Even the smell of the coffee felt different, like it belonged to a group, like it needed permission to be bold. They moved in like it was always theirs, and I'm the one who forgot to ask for permission. Later that morning, Veda slid a paper across the kitchen island. I picked it up, still warm from her printer. At the top it read, "Summer Weekend Room Assignments." It wasn't typed. She'd taken the time to write out each name in pen. Master bedroom, Mom and Dad. Guest room, Veda and David. Bunk room, the kids. That was it. I stared at the page, tracing the ink with my thumb. "And me?" I asked. Flat. No emotion. Just clarity. Veda didn't look up. "You can crash on the couch or something. I mean, you're barely ever here anyway." I folded the paper once, then again, and tucked it into the back of my notebook. That afternoon, I helped my nephew with a game on his tablet. He handed it to me sticky with grape juice and half-done levels. While it updated, a notification pinged at the top. Family group chat. I didn't mean to look, but the tab was already open. I scrolled. "Let's hold off on telling her for now," my mother had written. "That one tends to overreact," Veda replied. "She's always been sensitive. We'll ease her into it later." They weren't talking about a plan. They were talking about me. They didn't use my name, just that one. Not even Callan. Not your sister. Just some afterthought of a person they needed to tiptoe around. How long have I just been that one? I could have stormed in. I could have printed every screenshot, held a family meeting, asked why my name no longer belonged in their conversations. Instead, I closed the tab, gave the tablet back, kissed my nephew's forehead, went outside. The wind off the water was calm, the kind that brushed past you like it didn't need to be noticed. I sat in my white porch chair, the only thing here that had survived 3 moves, 4 cities, and 1 nervous breakdown. Silence isn't weakness. That's what people like my family never understand. Silence, when used right, is a weapon. It's a wall. It's the only space they can't fill with their noise. I pulled out my notebook, flipped past grocery lists and garden sketches, and wrote one line. They underestimate me. That's their first mistake. Dinner that night was grilled chicken. My mom offered to spruce up the kitchen with new tiles. Veda suggested bunk beds for the kids, so we can fit more people. I sat at the table, ate in silence, nodded when spoken to. They said this place instead of your house. They told stories I wasn't part of, memories I didn't share. I realized then, it wasn't that they didn't see me, it was that they didn't want to. Later that night, I pulled out a Sharpie and wrote my name on the bottom of one of the mugs. Not fancy, just Callan, in permanent ink. I placed it on the top shelf of the cabinet. Quiet, plain. If they're going to erase me, I'll leave marks that don't wash off. It started with a game. My nephew was bored, bouncing between the couch cushions while Veda scrolled her phone, and my mom reheated soup she insisted was still good from the day before. I offered to help him finish a puzzle level on his tablet, one of those brain games that claimed to be educational but mostly just buzzed like a slot machine. He handed it to me without looking. The screen was sticky, the battery low. I tapped around, half paying attention, when a banner slid down the top. Family group chat. The preview read, "Final head count. Beach weekend confirmed." My thumb hovered over it longer than it should have. I wasn't planning to open it, but I did. What I saw wasn't a surprise. Not really. Just confirmation of what I hadn't dared name out loud. There were messages going back 2 months, coordination, lists, talk of borrowing chairs from the church, ordering linens. Photos of the backyard from different angles with circles drawn on where the dance floor could go. Vida was leading it, of course. My mom chimed in now and then, usually asking if they needed her potato salad. The wedding, Bryony's wedding, was happening. At my house. And I was nowhere in the conversation. No one had sent me a thing. Not an invite, not a heads up. Not even a, hey, we're thinking. I scrolled further. A message from Mom. Let's not tell her yet. She tends to spiral. Then Veda. She's been weird since she moved. Probably lonely or depressed again. I blinked. Read it again. Again. I hadn't said a word. Not to them. Not about the house. Not about how hard it had been to get it. Not about how badly I needed it to be mine. Apparently, my silence was suspicious. I locked the screen and handed the tablet back to my nephew. He didn't notice anything, still fixated on the screen as it buzzed for another life. My face stayed still, but something inside me shifted. Or maybe collapsed. Back in college, I took a semester off. Mental health, they called it on paper. In real life, it was exhaustion and needing to not drown. My mother told the neighbors I was taking a break to explore options. She never asked what those options were, never asked how bad things had gotten before I stepped away. Now, years later, that same silence, the one I used to protect myself, was being twisted into proof that I couldn't be trusted, that I was unstable, that I needed to be managed. They didn't worry about me, they just made room to write me out of the story. That night, we sat around the dinner table. They talked about vendors and color schemes like nothing had shifted. I held my fork, smiled when expected, said nothing. I could have asked, could have blown it wide open, but I didn't. I watched them. Noticed who spoke the most, who changed subjects, who didn't meet my eyes. Then I excused myself, said I was tired, walked out to the porch and let the night air settle on my skin. Later, after they went to bed, I pulled up the chat on my laptop, took screenshots, labeled them, backed them up in a folder I named House Matters, set the access to private, printed 3 copies, stored one in my desk, one in a fireproof envelope, and one in my glove box. When you've been invisible long enough, you learn how to move without being seen. I opened a browser tab and started reading about property rights, occupancy laws, and California's tenant clauses. Opened another tab and searched. How to remove someone from private property without escalating. And then I remembered something Merrick told me once when I helped him sort through a messy custody case. Don't raise your voice, he'd said, dry as ever. Raise your receipts. Now I understood. After midnight, I was still at the dining table with a cup of tea gone cold. I clicked back into the group chat one more time, just to see. At the top was a new conversation thread. Title: Without Callan. That was the moment I knew. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been excluded on purpose. The next day, I changed how I moved through the house. No more casual glances, no more internal excuses like, maybe it's just how families are. That chapter had closed the minute I saw a chat thread labeled Without Callan. I sat at the dining table that morning, opened my laptop, and started backing up every screenshot, every message I'd saved from the group chat. I printed them in batches, highlighted names, dates, context. I wasn't being paranoid. I was preparing. I made a folder, labeled it Carmel House Private Use Only, and slipped the papers inside, password protected everything. Downloaded a backup to a hard drive I kept in my glove box. And every time I felt shaky, I opened my phone and recorded a voice memo. Not to vent, just to log what happened, who said what, and how I felt in that moment. Then I deleted them, just in case. But the words stayed with me. I wasn't crazy. I was being cornered, and I needed proof. By Saturday, the noise returned. Not from my family directly, but through them. Veda had invited 2 of her old friends from high school to swing by and see the place. I only knew because I heard unfamiliar laughter downstairs while folding towels. I came down to find them halfway through a tour. She was showing off the backyard, pointing out where the ceremony tent would go. One of the women turned to her and said, "It's so generous of you to host the summer wedding here. This place is just perfect." Veda didn't flinch, just smiled and said, "We've put a lot into it." I didn't say a word, just stood at the back door, out of view, and jotted it down word for word in my notebook. I wasn't invited to their script, but I was still writing everything down. That afternoon, we had a small celebration for one of our cousins, his anniversary or something. Veda had set up a little backyard spread, streamers, fold-out tables, a couple centerpieces from the dollar store. 2 weeks before, I had ordered a handcrafted ceramic set from an artisan online, had it shipped to the house with a handwritten card tucked inside. I never mentioned it. I just wanted to do something nice, quiet. During the party, Vida handed the couple the ceramic gift in front of everyone. "Found this while I was traveling last month," she said. "Thought it'd be perfect for your kitchen." They hugged her, called her thoughtful, said, "You always do the sweetest things, Vida." I didn't react. I just stood there, iced tea in hand, watching a moment unfold that used to be mine. I thought back to choosing the glaze color, double-checking the shipping address. The card, of course, was missing. Later that evening, when the yard was quiet and the plastic tablecloths were tossed, I added it to the folder, not as evidence of theft, but as a reminder. That night, I sent Merrick a message, simple, coded, direct. Time to pull thread. He called me back within minutes. "Let's talk Monday, and Callan, keep a paper trail." I started digging. Property law, trespassing nuances, guest versus tenant boundaries. I reviewed California codes, started bookmarking legal pages, printing relevant sections. I installed a new camera inside the front hallway, not for spying, just to log entry and exit. Put a password lock on my router, cut access to the shared guest Wi-Fi they had been using. Changed the locks on 2 interior doors and labeled one room "Do Not Enter, Storage." You can't fight a fire by crying at the smoke. You need water or receipts. On my laptop, I created a new folder, Exit Plan, and started filling it slowly. Not with plans to leave the house, but with a list of steps I'd take to make sure I never had to leave anything I built again. The next morning, I poured 2 mugs of coffee, one for me, one for my mom. We sat on the porch like nothing had changed. She talked about property taxes, mentioned how beach homes were an unnecessary burden, slipped in a comment about how Veda manages everything so well, it's just in her blood. I nodded. Let her talk. She said, "This house is a blessing, but it shouldn't all fall on you." I looked at her and smiled. "Oh, it doesn't. Not anymore." They thought I was retreating. I was just moving my pieces. Later, I passed through the kitchen to rinse out a cup. Veda's phone buzzed on the counter, face down. I didn't touch it. But the screen lit up. A message popped up from someone named Andrea. It read, "Let's finalize the guest list for the wedding." I wasn't on the list, but I was about to make the cut. They were still planning, and I was done pretending not to notice. It started as whispers, really. Soft references here and there. During lunch one day, I caught Veda telling a cousin that, "We've been thinking about adding a guest house out back." She said "we" like I was part of that sentence, like this was some group investment. Later that week, my mother commented without irony, "It's nice the family finally has a place to gather. It brings us all together." She said it while folding one of my bath towels like it belonged to everyone. I kept my mouth shut. Watched the way they used phrases like, "our little getaway," and "the beach house." Not once did anyone say Callan's house. I used to let these things slide. It was easier. Easier than confrontation. Easier than the emotional cleanup that comes after. But I'd been sliding for so long, I didn't realize how far I'd slipped. I wasn't even standing on the floor anymore. I was underwater, and they were up on the deck planning renovations. Odessa, my neighbor, stopped by while I was trimming hedges that Saturday. She's lived next door for over 20 years, knew the neighborhood, knew the gossip, knew how to read between the lines. She leaned on the fence and asked casually, "So, you moving out soon?" I blinked. "What makes you say that?" She smiled, but there was a flicker of confusion behind it. "Your sister mentioned the house was going into a family trust or something like that. Just figured." That was the first I'd heard of it. Legal moves, ownership shifts, decisions I wasn't included in. I smiled back. A slow one. The kind I use when I want people to think I'm less sharp than I am. "No," I said. "I'm just getting started." That evening, I wandered into the living room, sipping tea, and noticed something off about the wall. A photo had been added to the gallery frame display, the kind families put up to make places feel homey. It was a picture I'd taken years ago, me and my grandfather sitting on a pier. I remembered the day, the breeze, the sandwich he'd split with me, even the exact moment I snapped it on my old camera. But the label underneath read, "Veda and Grandpa, Summer '09. Veda wasn't even there. I picked up the frame, turned it over, checked for another label. Nothing. Later that night, I brought it up to Mom, gently. Funny, that photo in the living room, I don't remember Veda being there. She didn't even pause. Oh, maybe we got the label wrong. It doesn't matter. It did. It wasn't about the picture, it was about what story they wanted remembered, and who they wanted erased. I took the photo down, quietly, wrapped it in a towel, and placed it in my drawer. The next day, during dinner, the slow bleed continued. Veda mentioned wanting to redesign the outdoor deck, said something about a fire pit and better seating for next summer. No one looked at me. Then an uncle, halfway through his ribs, laughed and said, "You know, you really ought to thank Veda for getting this place together. She's the glue." They all laughed. I didn't. I set my fork down, folded my napkin, looked right at him and said, "I'll be sure to thank myself later." The room went quiet, for one whole second. Then someone cleared their throat, changed the subject, poured wine. They were so used to me being the quiet one, they didn't know how to process anything that didn't sound like surrender. That night, I printed a laminated sign and taped it to the front door. Private residence, access by permission only. No one said anything the next morning, but they all read it. I saw Veda's eyes hesitate for a split second as she stepped out for her morning run. I started locking the cabinet drawers that held my documents, my laptop, created a habit of moving my things into one room before I left the house, locking it like a tenant afraid of the landlord. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't building walls. I was finally drawing lines no one else had bothered to. Later that night, as I was brushing my teeth, I heard a soft knock on the bedroom door. "Hey!" Veda called from the hallway. "We need to talk about the 4th of July plans. This year's a big one." They're still planning, but now, so am I. The morning felt normal. Birds, breeze, coffee. I went out to run a few errands, groceries, dry cleaning, small things, nothing out of the ordinary. Driving back, I noticed more cars than usual on my street. SUVs with out-of-state plates, a shuttle van idling at the end of the cul-de-sac. Maybe a neighborhood party, I thought. 4th of July weekend, could be anything. But then I saw the white folding chairs. Rows of them, lined up like they belonged. A balloon arch near the front steps. Tablecloths blowing in the breeze. I slowed the car. That was my house, my porch, my lawn, my gate. And it was dressed like a venue. I pulled into the driveway, half expecting someone to rush over with an explanation, an apology, some last-minute miscommunication. Instead, I got a security guard. He held up a clipboard and asked my name. "Callan, this is my house," I said. He glanced down, flipped a page. "Sorry, ma'am, you're not on the guest list." I didn't move. Just stared, trying to process the sentence, trying to understand how my name, on the deed, on the loan, could vanish from this property so easily. Then Veda appeared, light blue dress, lipstick, barefoot on my gravel. "You weren't supposed to be here," she said flatly. I looked at her, at the crowd behind her. Some turned away. Others watched like I was the problem, like I'd shown up to ruin a good time. My mother stood on the porch, arms folded, waved. Not one of them looked surprised. I backed the car out, parked 2 blocks down, sat in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel like it could hold me together. I remembered painting that house, picking out the fixtures, hanging the porch light myself, standing on a stool because I didn't want to wait for help. This wasn't just disrespect, it was theft, wrapped in flowers and speeches. I didn't go back that night, didn't crash the ceremony, didn't shout, didn't cry in front of them. I drove to the edge of town, parked at a lookout, and watched the sun drop behind the cliffs. Then I drove home. Not to the house, just home. In my head, somewhere safe. It wasn't until the next morning that Odessa sent me the video. She recorded it from her yard, grainy but clear. The MC stood under a canopy and said, "Let's take a moment to thank Vida for opening up her beautiful coastal home for this special day." The crowd clapped. My name wasn't mentioned. My father was there, smiling, laughing with a drink in hand. In the background of the video, you could see the white porch chair, the one I'd moved 3 times, the one I'd cried in after signing the loan. It sat in the shot like a prop. My memories had become decor. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, alone, Watched the security footage. Watched them walk through rooms I cleaned. Touched drawers I organized. Toast under lights I installed. I picked up the phone. "Merrick," I said in a voicemail. "I'm ready to move forward, legally." I pulled out the folder labeled Unauthorized Use of Property, opened a new page. Incident log. First entry, July 4th. Unauthorized event. Full-scale wedding. 57 guests. I didn't burn the bridge. They held a wedding on it. My phone buzzed constantly that night. Messages from family. None of them said sorry. Just things like, "You didn't have to make it a thing." Or, "You know how Veda is." And one from Mom. "Don't turn this into drama." I turned on my surveillance app. Watched the house in real time. Porch lights still on. A plastic chair left out. Streamers still in the tree. I tapped a button. The light turned off. I wasn't home when they stole from me. But I'll be present when I take it back. When I walked back into the house that Monday, it still smelled like wine and perfume. Plastic cups on the deck, crushed streamers in the hallway, a long smear of frosting across the kitchen floor like someone had stepped on a slice of cake and never cleaned it up. My mother's casserole dish was on the counter, covered in foil, like a relic from a battle no one admitted happened. I didn't touch anything. Instead, I moved through each room with my phone camera, documenting every chair, every spill, every bit of my life used as a backdrop for someone else's celebration. I didn't feel hurt, not anymore, not even angry, really. I felt like I was studying a crime scene. Wine stains on the carpet I had installed myself. A broken corner on the handmade seashell centerpiece I placed by the front window. A tile I had laid with my own 2 hands, now cracked under the dining table. If you don't value what's given freely, you'll never understand its cost. So, I started cleaning. Not to restore it, this wasn't about fixing anymore. I was preparing. By that afternoon, I had already emailed Merrick. Subject line, action, attached were screenshots of the chat, photos from the porch cam, a digital copy of the wedding guest list with my name notably missing. He called 30 minutes later. "We'll move forward," he said, quietly. We agreed on 3 steps. A cease and desist letter, a formal trespass notice, and a soft takedown order targeting the photos and content used online without consent. I added a new tab to my folder. Phase 2, containment. Printed everything, filed copies in a fireproof lockbox, kept the originals on a flash drive in the lining of my handbag. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was Veda. "Mom says you're being dramatic. This is going too far." I didn't reply. I just forwarded her the draft of the cease and desist. Not a word added. No explanation. No justification. The next buzz was my mother. "Do you really want to destroy this family over a misunderstanding?" I stared at the message, then typed slowly. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just finally not rebuilding it alone." Sent. Archived. My father's text was shorter. "You used to be better than this." I left it unread. By Wednesday, the status went live. Veda posted it on Facebook, dressed in just enough ambiguity to be weaponized. It hurts most when family sues you for opening your doors and heart. It blew up, dozens of likes, comments filled with hugs and heart emojis, people writing things like, "You're the strong one," and "You always put others first." Not one of them asked what had really happened. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years screenshotted it and sent it to me. "Just in case you didn't see," she wrote, I did. And for a second, I felt the burn of being misunderstood. Again. But only for a second. Then came the calm. They've always owned the narrative. Always been better at the photo ops, the phrases that make them look good in public while slicing you open in private. I opened my notes app and started drafting a post of my own. Then closed it. Instead, I added a time-stamped screenshot of her status to my evidence folder. Quiet, precise. That night, I reread the journal I kept the first month after moving in, back when the house still smelled like paint and possibility, before the walls knew any voices but mine. One entry read, "This space will not be shared until I'm ready to be seen." I sat back in my white porch chair, the same one that's moved with me since college. It used to be where I hid. Now, it's where I watch. I opened my phone and set a timer. 30 days. The legal deadline for a formal response to the letter Merrick had sent. I didn't need them to apologize anymore. I just needed them to be legally quiet. The sky was dimming, and I had just finished locking up the side gate when I heard it. A knock at the front door. I waited a second, then another. Veda's voice, just behind the wood. "We need to talk, before you make this worse for everyone." They still think this is my fault. They're about to find out it isn't. Veda sat across from me at the kitchen table like it was her own. Hands folded, back straight. That same condescending tilt of the head she's been perfecting since we were kids. "You've made this entire family feel unsafe in your presence," she said. I didn't respond. I just looked at her. My thumb pressed gently against the record button in my jacket pocket. She kept going. "You twist everything. Always have. You never grew up, Callan. You isolate, then act surprised when we don't include you." My breathing didn't change. I didn't flinch. Her phone buzzed. She looked down, then smiled. "Speak of the devil." It was our mother. She answered, put the call on speaker without asking. "Why did I even have you?" Mom's voice came through, clear as day. "If all you do is tear this family apart?" I reached into my pocket and stopped the recording. "I heard enough," I said, standing. "That's all I needed." I didn't slam the door, didn't scream. I walked outside. The porch chair waited for me like it always had. I sat. Let the air sit heavy around me. Nothing moved. No cars, no wind, not even the usual bird call in the trees. It was just me and the silence. I didn't cry. I didn't sigh. I just existed, for the first time in a long time, without being touched by their noise. Years ago, after my first hospitalization, Mom told me, "You're lucky to be here at all," as if my existence was something I had to earn. I pulled out the voice memo from my jacket, deleted it, then pulled a flash drive from the zipper lining and copied it there instead. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about preservation. The next day, a cousin dropped by, said she'd been going through old family boxes and found something addressed to me. A yellowed envelope with my name on it in cursive. Inside, a letter from my grandmother. Not typed, not generic. Written in her hand, inked, strong. She wrote, "You were always the quiet one. But you saw everything, and I saw you." She talked about the trust fund, the one she'd left for me before she passed, one that somehow disappeared when Mom and Veda took care of the estate. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She gave me facts, tangible, legal, buried by the people who smiled the most at family dinners. It wasn't the betrayal that broke me. It was finally being seen. I called Merrick, told him to reopen the estate file. He didn't ask questions. We filed 2 complaints that week, one for inheritance fraud, one for document manipulation. I rewrote my will. Veda's name was removed. So was my parents'. No room for explanation. Just ink. Just law. I drafted a public post. Never sent it. I didn't need a mob. Didn't need sympathy. They could keep talking. I had signatures. Word got around. Family split. An aunt called, whispered, "You're brave. They'll never admit it, but you changed something." I didn't argue. I let the court dates and letters speak. They built their version of truth on my silence. I was tearing it down with paper. I spent that weekend taking down every framed photo of family from the hallway. Wiped the dust. Boxed them. Didn't smash a single glass. Then I hung up one new frame, centered. Alone. Inside it, her letter. "This house doesn't carry their legacy anymore. It carries mine." A month went by, and no one knocked. No cousins, no casseroles, no half smiles through the screen door like nothing had happened. The silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. I started walking barefoot through the house again. The floors didn't creak the same way they used to. Or maybe I was finally hearing them differently. No more voices echoing in the hallway that weren't mine. No more extra shoes by the door. Just mine, always mine. Even the air felt cleaner, less borrowed. The framed letter from my grandmother hung in the hallway now, right where the family photo wall used to be. I'd passed by it each day, and each time it held its weight. The noise left. But so did my need to be heard by the wrong people. 2 weeks earlier, I sat down at my desk, opened a blank page on my old blog, and wrote, I didn't name names, I didn't curse or accuse, I just told the truth. I told the story of how a woman can own a house and still be treated like a guest in it, how silence is spun into mental illness, how family can take your things and call it tradition. I wrote about the wedding, the photo, the lies, and I told them I survived it. The post spread fast. Messages flooded in. Hundreds at first, then thousands. Some shared their stories. Others just said, "Thank you." Some said, "This happened to me too." A few defended my family, called me bitter, selfish, but most didn't. One woman said, "I'm 64. I waited my whole life for someone to put this into words." The part that stuck the most? That line I almost deleted. Some families build legacies, others build cages. Veda texted me a screenshot of the post. "So this is how you repay us?" Mom emailed, "You didn't have to humiliate your own blood." Dad stayed silent. But my cousin Lisa called me from Indiana. She didn't say anything for the first few seconds, just breathed. Then whispered, "You said what I never could." An aunt I barely knew mailed a card, no return address. Inside, "You made me proud to be quiet no more." Not everyone understood. Not everyone needed to. Merrick called on a Thursday. "It's done," he said. "Cease and desist held." They backed off. We didn't file lawsuits, didn't make a public scene, but the line was now drawn, legal, final. Veda removed her posts, deleted photos, stopped texting. Just like that, the storm folded back into stillness. There was no apology, but there was silence. And sometimes, that's all the closure you get. I moved the furniture around one morning, just for me, painted one of the walls sea glass blue, brought my porch chair inside and set it by the window, made it a writing corner. The air didn't smell like old perfume or guilt anymore. I breathed deeper, slept through the night. I didn't win anything back. I just finally stopped giving it away. Later that week, I went through an old photo box, found a group shot from years ago, Thanksgiving maybe? Veda had her arms around everyone. I was off to the side, cropped halfway out. I didn't throw it away, didn't rip it, just kept it. Because even if their version of family wasn't mine, parts of it had still been real. Real enough to hurt, real enough to heal from. You can forgive people from a distance. And sometimes, that's the healthiest place to love them from.